Hello and welcome to another episode of Tawdry Tabletop, and more specifically Wargame Watch, this series where we look at all different types of miniature war games and find out what kind of fun we can have. So today I have a special one, given that I was away for about 100 days as I decided to start a Masters and then thought I would have time, which it turns out I did not so far. However, this was meant to come round about the start of November and get delivered as part of the Blacksite Studios Backroom event 2023. Unfortunately, it did not come until just about the end of November, so it fit right in, apparently, with the Christmas season.
I mean, you didn't have any time until then anyway, so it's like they just love you.
It was very fortuitous. But I have subsequently built the terrain and minis. This is not all of it, as you can see from that lovely event. And I've played a good few games by now, and that's why I want to discuss it with you.
We're hoping you know the rules.
Hopefully. But what is Don't Look Back? So Don't Look Back is a miniatures game made by Matthew Burns, who is part of, I believe, Blacksite Studios, which is an American company I know nothing about. However, they did a backing campaign specifically for Don't Look Back. I believe this is the second edition. Again, I can be wrong there.
Too busy playing to look it up?
Too busy playing. I didn't know the company until I just happened to come across this event. It was not even a Kickstarter, it was just on their own website, which for me is always a bit of a positive, because I'm a bit wary of Kickstarter these days. And if anyone knows me, they know that I love slasher films. Anything that's got to do with a killer chasing down attractive teenagers for the crimes of being attractive and having sex just fits right within my wheelhouse. I watch them all, I don't really care how bad they get.
Coming across as you get some weird psychological issues
I
here,
do.
but we're going to move away from them,
Yes.
perhaps for my safety.
You're saying you're an attractive teenager?
Like 20 years ago?
Well, it's not now. I can't stab you.
Well, moving on from my old age and his weird issues.
So, Don't Look Back is a miniatures game which is built to basically recreate that experience of a slasher film on the tabletop. Okay, so you play as one of the illustrious heroes, which are built from resin miniatures. I don't know if we can zoom in, if we can get to...
I mean, it's been a while. I do not know if we can. Alright guys, this is the table. This table has seen better days. It is where everything gets built, everything gets played.
Everything gets painted. This is the table of pain.
There we go. So you can see them here. I haven't painted them yet. It's very unlikely David will be the one painting these. He'll admit that.
Yes,
is he admitting it? He's admitting
probably. However, these are illustrious heroes, and they are basically stock stereotypes of 80s slashers. So you've got the jock, you've got the nerd, you've got, you know, the rich preppy girl, the ranger who just happens to be there, and they're all there in their finery. And you play as one of those characters. You have to have at a minimum 4. However, if there's only 2 people, you can choose 2 characters that potentially complement each other or not. And then you have to try and survive from the killer. So the killer is dictated, its logic is dictated based on a sort of AI from cards, which are a mixture of what's called this motive, its MO, and its visage. So its visage is basically what type of killer is our killer. So is it more of a supernatural killer, or in this case, is it an actual person? Okay,
this particular one's called the mundane, which is why he's saying that. I'm not zooming anymore. I'm really bad at
this
it.
This is our mundane, that's fine. And this will dictate what sort of attacks they can do, what sort of special abilities they have. But there is also a card that dictates their MO. So this is to do with the movement of the killer. So each of these will have a slightly different criteria for how the killer moves. And there's 4 phases. in the game, and one of them is specifically to do with moving the killer. Okay, so you basically start a game with your killer preset up, you choose your characters, and then you set up your area. This is played on a 3 foot by 3 foot gaming area, so you will need that specific size, because the way it works is that the table is split up into 4 sections. Quadrants, yes, that's the word. A, B, C, and D, and then you have to place particular things in those areas. So look at an example from the core book, where it gives you 5 sort of starter scenarios.
While he's looking, I'm going to give some advice. If this is a game you're into and I really enjoy it, print a couple of key pages. If you're like myself, you're a weirdo with a laminator, laminate them, because you're going to use them a lot.
We're not going to zoom into this, but you can see that it's got a setup of this particular mission, which is called camping, and it'll tell you where to place your terrain. Now, terrain is something you're very much going to need for this game, so I would suggest if you play any other miniatures games, take the terrain from it. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit 100% to the theme.
This is the only time he will say this.
Yes, it's the only time I will say this, but it's because you need a lot of terrain. And the reason why you need a lot of terrain is because of what's called the jump scare system. So if any of the characters move within 2 inches of a piece of terrain, a jump scare will happen, and that you roll a d10, so...
It's a lot like me in the dark, really. I'm
yes.
a pretty jumpy
So,
person.
for example, you'd roll a d10, and then you would consult a table to see exactly what happens. Now, sometimes nothing happens. Maybe a light will flicker, because light's quite important in the game. Or, it might be that a friendly character teleports behind you to tap you in the shoulder to see if you're okay. And if you're very unlucky, it means that the killer will then suddenly appear and attack you from whatever bushes. So you will need a lot of terrain. With the backroom event, obviously, we were given MDF terrain, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But you will need even more than what they give you. So I would suggest get a map, get a good gaming map. It's just grass, doesn't matter what it is. Get trees, as many trees as you can get. Get the terrain from Blacksite Studios, and just anything else that you think.
Rummage through your garden, get some rocks.
Yep, get some rocks. This absolutely, if you want to get a game that will force you to get more into the terrain side of the miniature hobby, this is absolutely a great one, because it will force you, because you will understand that you don't have enough terrain and you will need to get more somehow. Okay, so all you do is you then basically go around trying to survive from the killer and fulfill an objective, whatever that is. So for example, sometimes you're trying to get the keys to a car so you can escape. Sometimes you're trying to get to the road so that you can then escape. It's all about escaping usually. Finding one of your friends who's went missing and going on from there. But how do you control your characters? Okay, so let's take a wee look. And one thing I do actually love about this game is that it uses repurposed VHS cases. So it's a bit of a blast in the past when I got this through and ended up with about 8 of these for various sort of expansions. And it's a very cool way to fit the theme of sort of like old slashers and the game itself, which is really nice. So each character will have specific stats. Okay, it's typical of wounds, a movement, which is in inches, a combat skill, awareness, a terror value, that's how much terror they can take before they get too scared and die, and luck. Okay, so for example, this is Mia Green, the punk of the party, and she has a specific skill, which is roll with it. A free action, she can make a combat skill roll because she likes to fight. She's got a chain, because again she's a punk, but she can use as a weapon. And then she's got her stats. She's a teenager, obviously. She has 10 wounds, a movement of 4 inches, a combat of 11, and awareness of 9. So the way the skills work, you're given that particular value, a combat of 11 and an awareness of 9. You would then roll a d20, just like in a typical role-playing game, and you're aiming to roll equal to or underneath whatever the value is on this card. So I wanted to roll under an 11. I got a 10 in my roll, therefore that combat skill succeeds. Now there are things that will modify the value. For example, for, based on how many points of terror, and the more terror you get, eventually it will become harder to succeed. So it is a game where you're trying to manage, your wounds and your terror while trying to, manage the objective, while the killer is constantly on the hunt for you and the other players.
This is mostly going to come into effect during movement. At least I found it usually did for me.
So yeah, mostly come in during movement. One thing about the rules is that there are a lot of actions. I won't get Yvette to zoom in because I think that's unfair, but just to give you an example, and this again is something that I would agree with her to print off so that you can, oops, I went too far.
So that's one of the other reasons you'll find yourself skipping through like 10, 15 pages to get to what you need to.
Yes.
It is a really nice
It is
book,
a lovely...
but it's laid out in a strange way if you're used to a bit more polished books.
These are all of the actions, your quick and your long actions. As you can see,
it's a lot of great boxes.
It's a lot of actions that you can do in a turn. So you will either print these out, which we need to do, or just keep a reference either in the PDF version or here, so you can constantly go back to it.
You can move twice.
But when you do, you then have to roll to see if your character trips up. The famous, when in a horror movie, slasher movie, when the young person is being chased, they always fall down. This can happen here if you roll equal to or less than your terror points with a d20 roll. But that's the key of the game. It wants to basically be a very thematic game that makes you feel like you're playing a character, in a slasher film. So let's talk about the terrain that we received. So as part of the backroom event, we received a bunch of terrain that fit into the theme of the camp, the Northwood State Park camp. And we were given a restroom, sort of changing area, rangers, cabin, and a few other smaller pieces as well, like bins and shed. And the lovely thing about these pieces of terrain is that all of the roofs come off, which I think is really neat. And they're all pre-painted as well, so if you buy these from Backstage Studios, you only need to worry about putting these together.
You do need to worry a little bit if you're like myself. David didn't have as much of a problem. Yes. I was more of a hindrance than a help, I think.
So the MDF, I would say, is a dream to put together. Get yourself some wood glue, and it'll be absolutely no problem at all to put together, and it looks absolutely fantastic once it is put together, and is very, very fun to play with. It's a strong proposition for someone who hasn't played a lot of miniatures games, because if they come into your game night and they see this terrain and you say to them, it's like a slasher film, it's like Freddy or Jason, Nightmare on Elm Street, or
whatever your favourite slasher film is.
Whatever your favourite slasher film is, straight away they'll understand the basic premise, and it's an easier buy-in for something like this. And you hand them this simple character sheet and say, this is all you need, well, apart from the actions, but don't tell them about that straight away. But just say basics: movement, shooting, interacting, and go from there. It's an easy sale.
Often come back to lie to your friends.
I mean, if you want to play tabletop games routinely, you're going to have to start lying to people to get them at the table. That's just a fact of life. I would suggest that one player sort of manages the killer, just because it does make the game a bit smoother, as well as controlling their character. You can swap it around as well if you want to, but I do believe just having it one area of the table with the appropriate cards, and then they just manage what happens, makes it definitely easier. So let's talk about the building of the miniatures. While I said that the MDF was an absolute treat to put together, the minis not quite so much. These are resin miniatures, which I kind of have a dislike of generally. just because you have to use super glue. I hate using super glue. The amount of times putting these pieces together that I glued myself to myself was far too much. It took probably far longer than it did. At least one of the characters has glue on her that I need to get off, and that's just taught me being bad.
It is not the worst time I've ever had putting together miniatures. As much as I love Carnivale, that was when you just completely gave up, threw a guy in the bin and bought a new version of him.
I put him together. But
the new version, not the one
yes,
that got thrown in the bin.
These are very small pieces at times as well though. As you can see, it is quite a small scale. And for example, with this character, Mia, the punk, her arms come as two separate very small pieces. Which mean you will probably need to use tweezers, you will have to sit there and jam it, and that's why she's got glue on the back of her, on the back of her skirt and everywhere else, because it took many attempts to glue to put together, but eventually she did
stay
together. I will say I do like that the killer miniature, you can build your own versions, you're given build options, and you're given enough pieces of resin.
I think this might be an attempt to zoom, is it? You can kind of see it, that's as good as it's going to get, guys.
Fine.
But you can see there's two different poses and they've all got different weapons. That's as good as I can do.
That's as good as she can do. But there are
been a while.
Enough pieces in this case to build two distinct killers, which is very, very cool, and it is multi-part, so you could, if you wanted to, build more. So, would I recommend this game? I would absolutely recommend this. Either, buying the PDF of the rulebook and proxying your own miniatures, or directly going to Blacksite Studios and buying the package that I bought. There's a lot more that I haven't shown in terms of expansions because I haven't put them together yet, but they do seem very fun, and I am looking forward to trying out more of the game. But based on my first impressions, this is an easy recommend, particularly if you like the theme, if you like slasher films. I do think that this really does a great job of giving you that experience.
And we've already talked about how you can use other models as a proxy, and that's something that is actually kind of encouraged by the game.
Yep, absolutely.
If you have a character that's your character in a role-playing game, or it's something that you're really proud it's the best thing you've ever painted, bring it into the game. Yeah, enjoy it.
Absolutely. It doesn't need to be these miniatures, it doesn't need to be this terrain. You could use the rules to tie into any setting, any terrain.
You can be in a city instead of the woods.
Yep.
As long as you've got lots of terrain to give you a jump scare, it's going to be a good time.
You will absolutely have a blast. So however you decide to get into this, I would definitely look for it on the Blacksite Studios website, or if any other third-party sellers have it. I don't know about in the UK, I don't think there's many.
Google just brings up "Don't Look Back in Anger" when I Google.
Yeah, loves Oasis. But particularly for this version, I think the best place to get it is the Blacksite Studios
Is that Oasis?
website. I think it was Oasis, so Don't Look Back in Anger.
I don't know, it to me it's mum music.
And yeah, absolutely would recommend it heartily. Buy the package if you want to, whatever this was called, the Backroom Event package, you can go and look it up. And have fun putting it together, playing the game, and let us know, have you played Don't Look Back, or if you haven't, would you like to in the future?
That almost feels like you're weirdly inviting everybody. He is pretty proud of the tabletopper that we use.
I am. If you would like to play this and you're in the greater Glasgow area.
Oh god, it is. He is now. Wow. However, friendly local gaming store is looking pretty good, so yes. You might actually meet David. If you do, I'm really sorry, he's weird.
So, thank you very much for watching. We hope you learned more about this great game, and that you have a good start to your 2024.
Bye!